In today's news, Premier Foy announces that BVI may face more stringent curfew measures.
Several police officers have been infected with COVID-19. Today we take a look at the BVI's essential workers and their increased risk with COVID-19. This is 284 News.
I think you need to clearly see what happened.
As far as what?
You and I, we decided we were going to take our space. What happened?
Yeah, and then I got into an entanglement in August. That's what I said.
An entanglement.
Yes. Yes.
An entanglement.
Yes.
A little entanglement never hurt nobody. For the month of August, enjoy double the fun when you activate a 2 GB data plan or any hero plan and get double data. But wait, man, we're making things even sweeter. We've got a deal even Jada can't resist. Sign up for Go Fast LTE and get your modem for only $149. The catch is, there's no contract required, but you'll definitely need the willpower to leave. So come get entangled with August. In August with the home team.
34 years and counting.
We ride together.
We die together. CCT for life.
A warm welcome to all of our viewers as we begin another great week of news here at 284 Media. It is Monday, August 31st, 2020. My name is Javon Wilson.
And of course, I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes. Definitely a great weekend. It feels really good, Javon, to be here once again, delivering the news to our viewers. But Javon, over the weekend, so much. So when I tell you
What a
so
weekend.
much.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, over the weekend, so much has happened. And, we see where last night, Premier Foy said in a statement that the House of Assembly members did meet yesterday for an emergency virtual meeting, and much was discussed, even the consideration of a possible 24-hour lockdown once again. Now, the cabinet is scheduled to meet, and they did schedule at 4 o'clock today, and we are now eagerly waiting for the Minister of Health to address the residents of the BVI about the most recent cabinet decisions. Of course, Javon, this came after we saw more cases over the weekend. Additional 12 cases were added to our count here in the territory, bringing us to 47 confirmed cases of COVID-19. So we can see how things have definitely escalated over the weekend.
Absolutely. And Kyla, the BVI community still continues to struggle with how to respond to these challenges associated with this pandemic. Today, some 5 months after the crisis began, and despite huge efforts to prevent an outbreak in the BVI, unfortunately now, like you said, we have had more cases of COVID-19 than we have ever had, with 38 active cases. You said 47 in total, but 38 active cases as we stand right now. Therefore, once again, the government is considering the harsh step of instituting another 24-hour curfew or lockdown to stop the community transmission. But Kyla, we can all still remember too vividly the difficulty of enduring a 24-hour lockdown. Recently, many persons have taken to social media to advocate both for and against it. But nevertheless, what we see is a debate of lives versus livelihoods. And that's continuing. I think that's going to be the conversation going forward as we try to figure out what's more important, or more importantly, how do we strike a balance that is healthy on both the side of health as well as the economy. But what the conversation is doing, Kyle, it's really exposing some of the structural advantages and disadvantages within our community. For example, the government salaries have been largely unaffected. And I want us to really zero in on that, because we do hear a lot of persons really pushing for a lockdown and on the other side of the spectrum saying, listen, we cannot afford it. But we have to remember that largely the persons who are unaffected by this pandemic as it relates to their financial stability, as it relates to retaining their jobs, is employed by the government. Except the recent moves by government as it relates to the airport and the National Parks Trust. However, in comparison to the private sector, which really is taking a hit, those persons do not get paid if they are not able to work. So, Kyla, this disparity really makes for a vexing situation, because where some can call for a lockdown to preserve lives without jeopardizing their livelihoods, there are other persons who do not have this luxury and are very desperate to avoid this lockdown despite the health concerns. So, again, they just simply want to preserve their livelihoods. However, even those thus far who have been privileged enough not to worry about our livelihoods, of course, persons like you and I who have been able to retain jobs, even those persons are now considering the possibility as government reserves continue to be drained with no end in sight for this pandemic. So the question remains, Kyla, can we as a society live with this persistent coronavirus threat? How much risk are we willing to take? But more importantly, how much risk avoidance can we afford at this time?
Javon, I think this will be the conversation throughout our newscast today, because that is the question, that is the sole question that has been of a concern during today and since the release of that press release from the premier. But as you said, we're seeing the steps from some statutory bodies where they're cutting salaries, and with everything there is an end. And even though government is probably the most stable employer, at some point we have to know, and as you asked, how long can we live with just persisting coronavirus?
And Kyla, the reality is, and we got this from Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Marlon Penn, recently within his press conference, mentioning the fact that even though government is currently able to sustain their employees, the fact remains, how long can they afford to do it? So I think it started to hit home with a 25% reduction in salaries, but it could get worse easily.
Right.
But Kyla, we have to move on into the newscast. We also know of Mr. Nyron turning in himself. I know earlier this year, I think that was back in February, he was wanted by the police force, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force. Just yesterday, we were learning that he was able to turn himself in. Additionally, across the world, we see the world over mourning the death of Mr. Chadwick Boseman. Of course, he was one of the lead acts in Black Panther, a man that is truly being remembered for his revolutionary acts, not just within the movie industry, but who he was as a person. And I think this is a grave, grave loss, especially in light of the fact that there has been a Black revolution going on as we try to preserve and promote and empower Black people across the world. But here today we see Mr. Chadwick losing his life to cancer at a tender 43 years old.
Javon, I think really asking the question, how did you feel when first watching the Black Panther movie?
It was one of the most liberating things, I think, not just for me, but Black people across the world, Kyla, because what he stood, or I think the characters within the movie stood for, was Black empowerment. And I think that is a message we need to continue to push. Black people have suffered many adversities throughout their lifetime, and I think these positive representation really means a lot, especially to our children. You know, Kyla, I came across a picture with a young kid. He had all his toy action
his Black
figures.
Panther toys, I saw
yes,
as well.
And the guy in question who lost his life, Mr. Chadwick, he was the one laying on the floor. Clearly, he's the one that died, but it's just really a sad reality,
really
even for our children. Kyla.
It really is. As you said, Black Panther was really, it was just a sight to see in media. We know how influential that is. And seeing Black Panther come to the screen, it made, I think, most Black persons' hearts smile to see us being represented in such a strong and just royalty and riches and all these great lights. But Chadwick, he played many other idols in our Black community, Jackie Robinson, and so much more. So he will definitely be missed across the world, because what he stands for, Javon, it was definitely amazing.
Absolutely. And Kyla, he brought us hope, I think, above everything else. Hope and joy is what he brought us.
Most definitely. So Javon, as you said, we have so much to get into, so let's just jump right into it. As I mentioned before, the BVI may be facing just yet another 24-hour lockdown. Now, the Premier of the Virgin Islands and Minister of Finance, Honorable Andrew A. Foy, alluded to this in a press release issued late last night. Now, over the weekend, the BVI has reported additional cases, bringing the territory's total active cases to 38. Now, this sprung the relative authorities and our leaders into action. Premier Foy informed the public that the House of Assembly held an emergency informal meeting to discuss matters related to COVID-19. All members of the House of Assembly were in attendance on this virtual meeting. It was reported that the meeting was fruitful and recommendations were made in the meeting, which includes but is not limited to an emergency meeting of cabinet to be held to consider the options for more stringent curfew order for the territory to assist with the containment of COVID-19. Now, other recommendations from the majority of members included, but are not limited to, the immediate implementation of a new 24-hour curfew here in the territory for a minimum of 14 consecutive days. Now, Cabinet was scheduled to meet Monday today at 4 p.m., which decisions will be made on the way forward as it pertains to the combating of COVID-19 in the territory. And Javon, as we sit here doing the evening news, we know that we ourselves, as well as our viewers, are definitely eagerly waiting to hear what the Minister of Health and Social Development, Honorable Carvin Malone, will basically come to the public of the British Virgin Islands and basically speak towards the decisions that were taken and made by Cabinet. So we're definitely eagerly waiting for that. But Javon, and I'm not sure if you remember, but viewers, in a live press conference held on the 9th of August 2020, so earlier this month, our Premier actually addressed the residents of the BVI about the boost of the economy through the construction industry. And during that address, Premier Foy stated that the BVI cannot afford another territory-wide lockdown. He said, and I quote, "We cannot take unnecessary risk that can trigger another complete lockdown. An internal assessment has shown that if we end up in another territory-wide lockdown, the money that we have to rebooting the economy will have to be used instead for social support. And when that is over, we will not have any money left to reboot the economy," end quote. He also said, "So we are walking on a very thin line. It is a tightrope. It might not seem so at the moment because we are able to move around and to conduct some sort of business." This is what the Premier of the Virgin Islands had to say earlier this month, Javon. So the fact that we are hearing that a 24-hour lockdown may be upon us is a very scary fact.
It is, Kyle, a very grim reality. And like the Premier alluded to, we cannot afford it. And that's the reality. There isn't no incoming money. We are not yet in a position where the territory is able to generate new revenue, even from the recently passed bills like marijuana and so on. At this point, even with the gambling bill, but at this point, the territory is in a very grim situation where monies are not flowing in. In addition to that, in addition to the government coffers being challenged, we also know that the private sector has taken a hit.
Yep.
As it relates to the tourism sector. We see some challenges with the financial sector as well. At this point, what is maintaining or serving as a clutch for the territory is the private enterprises, and they too are suffering, Kyla,
Yep.
in the reality that it's either we're within the curfew restrictions or the possibility of a lockdown, like you said. But Kyla, even prior to this weekend, just Friday evening, actually, just before midnight, it was also announced that the Cabinet of the Virgin Islands approved the reopening of additional businesses under the current 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew imposed. Now, the businesses that were approved includes hardware and building supply stores, suppliers of hurricane shutters, construction teams with no more than 10 people. I'd like to repeat that. Construction teams with no more than 10 persons, restaurant for takeout and deliveries only, computer equipment and office suppliers, bakery supplies, and laundries for drop-off and delivery or pickup only. Now, viewers, as it relates to churches and faith-based activities, they too were approved, but only under the condition that gatherings must be limited to 10 or less persons. The movement of intra-island ferries were also permitted, but they are strongly encouraged to adhere to social distancing measures and protocols outlined by our health authorities. We also know the beach visitation hours, viewers, they've been reduced. Initially, it was from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, access is only between 5 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon. No, this was last Friday, Kyla, I think, right before midnight. But fast forward to today, clearly we see that this reality is likely to change, of course, pending today's decision with the government of the Virgin Islands. But nevertheless, a very constant thing we've seen is the growing concern, Kyla, of locking down, especially the essential businesses, especially because we're now in the middle of a hurricane season. And I think that's one of the things we've been hearing about a lot over the weekends. Just recently, we can all recall Tropical Storm Laura. You know, when it was passing the British Virgin Islands and the region, it was a tropical storm at that point. But that quickly developed into a Category 4 hurricane. And we can all remember how that ravaged the state of Louisiana and many other places. So this was a sobering reminder that we really, really need to be in a state of readiness for hurricanes. And I'm sure this was government's new decision to add these businesses to the list was informed by that reality. Another thing we have to look at, Kyle, is, you know, a lot of persons do not have access to cooking equipment, and that might seem simple to some, but a lot of our residents depend on restaurants to eat daily. So with restaurants being closed prior to Saturday for takeout and delivery, it was quite a challenge for some because, you know, cooked food is also very essential. So it's a lot to consider, Kyla. I know one of the comments we came across right before coming onto this newscast is the fact that restaurants, of course, based on the fact that they were now allowed to reopen for takeout and delivery over the weekend, they went ahead with bulk shopping. Now, a lot of persons are duly concerned that their perishables might go bad.
Javon, I think the back and forth is really what is really confusing for persons. But we must understand, and when we really break it down, we have to understand that this is not necessarily the government's fault. I think as we see the cases rising throughout this weekend and over the last month, and the behavior of the people of the Virgin Islands, I don't think it truly reflects where we are as a territory trying to fight COVID-19. Right. But I think for persons to believe that lockdown is our only answer, I am not sure, because at some point for nearly 3 to a few months, we were COVID-19 free, and then popped up. And now we are seeing basically many cases popping up in a cluster. So how are we, even after a lockdown, if it does come to that, what next?
Right, because the reality is I think what we need to strive to do, Kyle, is flatten that curve. At this point, it seems as if we're striving for a COVID-free environment, and that might not be very possible in these times. No country across the world has been able to achieve that. So like many persons are saying across the community, what we need to do is manage that risk. And it comes at a very high expense, Kyla, but we have to learn to manage ourselves. We have to learn to police ourselves in this very unpredictable time, because there's no other way around it.
Javon, I think what I would say, being COVID-free, I think we could look over in Anguilla, where Anguilla have only confirmed 3 cases. And I don't think it's necessarily the differing approach in government, but the people of the different islands, how they have approached the situation. Absolutely. So I think that is more so what it is. But if the people of the Virgin Islands do not understand where we are right now, then we will not be COVID-19 free.
Absolutely. Viewers, we have to go to a quick commercial break. As you would have known by now, many of our police officers are now infected with COVID-19. We're getting into that, what that means for our essential workers, especially now that they have increased risk of course, being affected by COVID-19, as well as possibly spreading that virus within our community. We're looking at that and so much more when 284 News returns.
Is business slow, cash flow down, hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media@cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works.
Viewers, welcome back to 284 News. Now, coming out of the weekend as well, we were able to confirm that a 44-foot vessel was intercepted by BVI's Joint Task Force while making an unauthorized entry into the BVI. Now, viewers, this was confirmed by the Commissioner of Her Majesty's Customs, Mr. Wade Smith, who said that the vessel was detected from a western direction by the platforms that are monitoring the territorial waters, and a collective response was made by the Joint Task Force. Mr. Smith said, and I quote, "I wish to commend the officers involved in this exercise for their hard work and diligence in vigilantly maintaining the integrity of our sea borders during this COVID-19 pandemic," end of quote. Now, Kyla, shortly after that announcement, we were also able to confirm that several law enforcement officers within the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force tested positive for COVID-19, of course, while standing on the front line to protect residents of the Virgin Islands. This was confirmed by a joint statement released by His Excellency the Governor Augustus Jaspert, as well as Minister for Health and Social Development, Honorable Carvin Malone, who said that between Friday the 28th and Saturday the 29th of August, 16 persons would have tested positive for the virus that causes COVID-19. The public statement said, and I quote, "As a result of contact tracing, members of the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force are being screened for the virus that causes COVID-19, and a small number of officers have tested positive. These officers have been removed from service and will remain in isolation until full recovery," end of quote. Now, viewers, the health authority within their established protocol began aggressive contact tracing, as you can imagine, to identify the primary and secondary contacts, but also to ensure that those persons are isolated and cleared of COVID-19 before being reintegrated into our community. But as a result of this new revelation, both the East and Long Look, as well as the Rotong stations, they've both been closed temporarily to allow for proper sanitization, and safety measures. Now, amidst everything else that is going on, Kyla, wow, one of the things I think we're able to recognize in this situation is the increased risk of exposure with our essential workers,
right,
how much they're facing while they're on the front line, essentially protecting us, the people of the Virgin Islands. And this includes all essential workers, Kyla. Clearly, we see how easily they too can become infected. And not only that, but unconsciously, our biggest fear, they might be spreading the virus because they're out here protecting us. Eventually, they get home to their families and possibly and unconsciously maybe spreading the virus. And the reality is and remains that a lot of persons are asymptomatic, are showing very few symptoms. And so in light of these facts, as a territory, we also now need to consider, even now more than ever, how we can slow the spread, between them, but ensure that, they're still in a position, where they're able to work. Is it a situation where we will need to do routine or random testing of our essential workers? Definitely that question has come up. So maybe that is the reality. But we just have to ensure that they are safe, Kyla, because at the end of the day, they're on the forefront and they're risking their lives. But equally, if we do not have the proper protocols and measures in place, they could easily be spreading the virus as well.
Most definitely. Javon, our essential workers, as we see, our police officers, but all essential workers that are on the front line as we battle COVID-19. As you said, we have to find a way to protect them, but for us to also, as you said, Can we do random testing or routine testing? Because these are all things that we have to think about. It's very unfortunate that these persons, these police officers, are going out there and just protecting us and making sure that there is law and order in our community, but they also have families at home. So we have to take all of these things into consideration.
Definitely. And I know, Kyla, this is not unique to the BVI. We've seen even on the international scene where the virus is even more rampant. And in those situations, very limited essential persons, and they have had to make a very hard decision to allow even those persons who would have tested positive to continue to work, because the reality is, you know, they're very limited as it relates to their human resources. And believe it or not as well, this was approved by CDC, which is one of the leading health organizations, of course, leading the charge against COVID-19.
Right.
But there are very strict measures in place. This includes pre-screening, ensuring that their temperatures are checked before their shifts, especially before they enter their facilities. Of course, regular monitoring, and more importantly, self-monitoring, to ensure that, you know, if you have symptoms, you're checking your temperature.
Right.
Wearing of masks, we cannot reiterate this enough. Even within the facility, even, you know, if you're next to your coworker, it's so imperative that you continue to wear your mask and social distance yourselves from each other, but also very importantly, disinfecting and cleaning your workspaces, especially if it's a shared area or shared equipment. But the reality is, you know, we have gotten to a place where a big chunk of our essential workers have been compromised, and God forbid it worsens. But we must be able, like you said, to be in a position where we're able to effectively manage ourselves in this pandemic, Kyla. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, but we're coming back with more as it relates to testing. Do you have to pay or is it free? We have the answers when 284 News returns.
Father Jesus, that line here long like church service.
Alright, you enjoy the rest of the day. Next customer line, please. Wait, hold on a second.
Yes, Sonny boy, come, yes, Sonny.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sonny boy. Over there. You must have cut fun people.
It's okay. I'll take care of it.
What? No man to take care of me.
How may I assist you? You want top of power?
You want top of power?
Join the prepaid party with CCT and enjoy more affordable data plans, more top-up promotions, more savings with hero bundles, and more value for your money each and every Tuesday with Top Up Turn Up Tuesday. Visit a CCT store today or anywhere CCT Top Up is sold and top up your phone.
5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. You want top of power?
Viewers, welcome back to 284 News. Now, Kyle, as we begin to wrap up, there seems to be some ambiguity as it relates to the cost attached to doing a coronavirus test within the BVI, because many persons are now alleging that they were mandated to pay $135 for that test to be administered. Many outraged residents, viewers, took to social media to post receipts that reflected the payment. The payment receipts says samples and kits at $55, as you can see on the screen, and sampling procedure at $80, totaling $135 per person. Reports reaching our newsroom also confirms that this cost was charged even to children who were required to test due to possible exposure. Now, viewers, this prompted us, of course, our newsroom, to reach out to Minister of Health, Honorable Carver Malone, who said, and I quote, "Testing is free and has always been for nationals and non-nationals." The minister further added that free testing also applies to persons who volunteer to get tested due to their possible exposure to the virus. But Kyla, contrary to the minister's comments, of course, we have seen a flyer coming from the governmental publication that says that the service has a fee, as you can see on the screen. Clearly now the minister is saying, Kyla, that that test is now free. So there's a lot of contradictions as it relates to the possibility of paying for this test. What we know for sure is that persons who did not have to travel, and we were able to confirm this, Kyla, they still were made to pay $125. We asked about a reimbursement, although the Minister of Health did not respond to that, but it is a troubling situation, especially now that we are encouraging territory-wide testing, Kyla.
Most definitely. Javon, at the end of the day, I think the messaging have to be consistent. It's either we're paying or we aren't paying. And as you said, and as we know, most persons who would want to be tested sometimes cannot afford $135, especially now with how our economy is. So we really want to get that right. If it is free, encourage persons to go out there and get tested.
Absolutely. We do not need any further deterrents. Viewers, we are out of time, but as usual, we are so grateful that you can join us. My name is Javon Wilson.
And of course, I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes. We'll see you again tomorrow for your daily news update. Have a good evening.